coming out here tonight. As I look in the crowd, we've got some loyalists out there. It's good to have y'all back with us. This meeting will not be called to order, as it is a continuation meeting of our April 18th meeting. In saying that, I would like to first ask Mr. Tate, glad to have you with us, if we have any liaison comments or updates or anything else you'd like to.
We are budget focused right now, and I think we are taking. I think it's already been announced, but I think we're going to probably take the subdivision ordinance at our July meeting.
Sounds good. We do have public comment listed as next on the agenda, and there are quite a few of you here tonight, and I assume there'll be quite a few of you that want to speak. We also, though, under new business, we have the Falling Water subdivision request for approval, and I don't think that's going to take very long to review. Matt will take us through that. If I could entertain a motion to move our new business above the liaison comments on the agenda at this time, if that's the pleasure of the board, and we could get a motion to that effect.
So moved. I'll second.
All in favor? Good deal, Matt.
What we have is the Falling Water subdivision in Highlands, and Mr. Van Hoogen here in the blue shirt. He's the developer and owner. Neil, do you want to give me any kind of history on any of it before I get started, or you can just take it away?
Well, I can give a little overview. It's,
okay.
It's a 52-acre piece of property, and I started out with a partner. I accidentally became a developer. I was a silent partner in Florida, but at any rate, I took it over in 2004 and just basically was improving it. And, we have some utilities in and some roads, and have got areas that are future development. Really, those roads aren't in, they're proposed roads. So I don't know what kind of information you guys are looking for.
That's good.
Yeah.
The lots that are hatched, those have already been sold, is that correct?
Yes. There are 8 homes in there. They were all built after 2000.
So basically, we're looking to approve a phased major subdivision, with phase 1 being the VH1 through 12 lot.
13.
This one there is 13. And then allow phase 2 to just be marked as future development. The fire marshal did review the roads. We went out, took the fire department out and inspected the roads. As you come in off Falling Water Drive, there is a steep road that comes in, but there's also another exit through Owl Gap. So the fire chief up there was pretty comfortable with that, and so was the fire marshal. There's a bridge on the property that Neil had engineering submitted to our office, and there was a couple recommendations that he'll have to do, paint, basically it's the bridge, but it did pass the load limit. The only issue that Jimmy Team, our fire marshal, had with it is, as we move into phase 2 years down the road, we'll have to be thinking about some maybe loop and change the design to where the roads meet a little bit different criteria. But for right now, he's comfortable with everything that it is. The other, some conditional things that Neil has agreed to is we have to revise the existing homeowners association, the Falling Waters, and for the new buyer, complete maintenance and installation of the bridge, and then he's also will, at some point, we need to get an as-built plat submitted for the future homeowners association. I think that's it. All community septics. There's no community septics, no community water.
Well, there is community water.
There is water.
The 4 wells are marked on the 4 wells, and they're marked on the plat.
But each lot's going to have a separate septic, right?
Yes. Owner built septic.
My question is, does he comply with our rules?
He meets as much of it as he can. And the reason I say that is the roads are probably 12 12 or 14-foot roads versus the minimum 16-foot.
But they're pre-existing.
Yeah, what happened is these lots were already sold years ago, and that plat was never recorded. And now they want to record the same lot, same thing, they just want to record it, and those roads, they're paved and in. You show it in, I don't see much of an alternative.
So in your opinion, you have to apply the ordinance?
With the exception of the width of the roads, and I think that with Jimmy's blessing on that, I think everything's good.
But he's satisfied with fire department.
Yeah.
It's,
I make a motion to approve.
I've been in subdivision.
I make a motion to approve.
We have a second.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Okay.
Before we have the public comment period, I'd like to address something that I think is very valid to what will be discussed here and what we've been discussing for our last few planning board meetings. And that is Senate Bill 612, which has passed through the Senate and has passed the first reading in the House. And basically, to sum it up, as Section 2.2 of this bill reads, and Section 2.2 will apply to counties, it says here, General Statute 153A, Section 121 is amended by adding a new subsection to read, a county ordinance shall be consistent with the Constitution and laws of North Carolina and of the United States. An ordinance is not consistent with state or federal law when, and number 5 under this is the ordinance purports to regulate a field for which a state or federal statute clearly shows a legislative intent to provide a complete and integrated regulatory scheme to the exclusion of local regulation. And number 6, the ordinance 1 regulates a field that is also regulated by a state or federal statute enforced by or a regulation promulgated by an environmental agency, and 2 is more stringent than the state or federal statute or regulation. So basically, in a nutshell, what that's saying is if a local ordinance is more stringent than the model state ordinance, then we're not sure at this point if that invalidates only that section of the ordinance, invalidates the whole ordinance. All we know is that under Senate Bill 612, that if this is inconsistent, then we're going to have to make some provision somewhere, whether it be to that section of the ordinance or redo the whole ordinance in its entirety. And that's just something that we're unsure of right now, and we're going to have to wait and see what the legislature does with Senate Bill 612 before we're in a position to discuss regulating this at the local level any further. So with that being said, I will open the floor to public comment, and as always, public comment is appreciated, and we appreciate you being here. We understand you've got things that you need to be doing this afternoon, and we just ask that if you would please just try to keep it to as close to 4 minutes as possible, just to give everybody a chance to be heard. And with that being said, I'll open the floor to public comment.
Anything good? Everybody should have.
Someone's got to break the ice.
No, he's an H. Okay. Should I sit?
That's a good spot. Yeah, that's a good spot.
Yeah, that's good.
Hey, I'm Danielle Duchenet. I'm a resident of Cowie. So I'm kind of against changing provisions. I don't really think fill should be put into the floodplains for multiple reasons. If it's an issue of what you should be able to do with your own property, adding fill is going to change the water, the way the water runs, and could eventually, there's going to be a flood because there's hurricanes. It's going to happen. It's a floodplain. So it'll affect neighbors downstream, anyone downstream if the fill is added. So. Yes.
Thanks, Ed.
My name is Alvin Reynolds, and I'd just like to go on record as saying that I'm also against moving additional fill into the floodplain. My wife and I own some floodplain property, so we have a vested interest in this. We know how high the waters came up in 2004. We were 8 foot on the trees. I saw the watermarks. And so, and these are supposedly 500-year floods. And we had devastating floods in 2004. We need to remember that before we make any substantial adjustments to the ordinance. Anytime you put an impervious surface in a floodplain, that water's going to roll off there like water off a duck's back. Concrete, asphalt, you name it. It's going to shift the water to somebody else's property. And bottom line, people that aren't putting fill in the floodplain are going to get inundated by additional waters, creating additional damage, more velocity from the river, from the rivers, which is going to cause erosion, more sedimentation, damaging the banks of the rivers and streams. So it's, I just want to go on record as saying if there are any adjustments made to the ordinance, I would hope it wasn't gutted. I would hope that you would, use prudence in making any kind of adjustments in this ordinance, in light of the fact that because somebody else takes liberties to elevate their property, I can appreciate that, property rights and all, just don't impinge on my rights as a property owner by causing me harm and damage in the process of doing that. That's all I'm asking. Thank you.
I think maybe I should go after him. I have some pictures here of the flood in 1948, if you would pass that down. I was standing on the little hill where Hardy's now is when I made that picture. In the foreground, you will see a field between where I am and the river. You can see the river very clearly. That field was a pasture in those days. There was 6 feet of water in that field. That was certainly floodplain, but you can see the river flowing freely beyond it. You can see the Indian mound across that. And if you look at the houses, those houses had 4 and 5 feet of water, depending on where they were. Those houses then were where Della's daughter's shop, and there's a defunct filling station right there. And it used to be DeSoto Trail Realty. And when DeSoto Trail was a restaurant, there was a flood, and I saw the booths floating about 4 feet above the floor of the restaurant because of the water. And fill dirt, if it had been there like it is today, if we have a flood of that magnitude down, you may have to tell goodbye to that McDonald's and that Dollar General and some of those other things that are in there, because that's how much water there was there then. A young man who was getting ready to graduate from high school got out a cow from in that water, and the cow was standing there with just a little bit of her head above the surface. And he got her out, and he got hung in a barbed wire fence, and the man that had the 2-story building you see there owned the cow, and he offered the boy 50 cents for having got his cow out. He didn't pay much attention to the barb scratches all up and down the boy's back. But that's how long ago, and that's not the first flood I remember. First flood I remember was 1942. Lamar, if some of your bottom land that you own was like that was then, you'd be foolish. How much land have you got that's floodplain? I think the second highest in Macon County.
I don't have any in the floodplain that's going to be developed.
Well, it's like you told me one time, sometime that land will sell.
Nothing that I own would ever be.
Well,
Because it's just not developed for you. But anyhow, that property right there's not in the floodplain now. Where the famous land.
well, I don't think that they know what a floodplain is then, because it will be flooded again
I
one
would
of
agree
these
with you on
days.
that.
I've seen too many of them.
But that's not in the floodplain.
McDonald's book club.
Is it?
We have 2, it's okay.
Where Derek used to work. Over there at the East Franklin shop.
When did it get declassified?
It came out with these new maps.
I didn't help make those maps.
We did a flood elevation certificate for the East Franklin Shopping Center, and it's out of the floodplain. Yeah.
Anyway, I thought you might like to know what it was like a long time ago, and I would like those back.
Was that bigger than 64?
Oh, yes. The water came over the top of the concrete bridge, both
Well, it did in 64
bridges.
too.
But, yeah, that water was over 6 feet deep right in front of where I was standing, on the hill where Hardee's is now.
It was a lake all the way
That's-
from the hospital drive all the way to about Ferrari.
Right. The water went all, a good long ways up what everybody then called the Asheville Road, which
Yes.
it went up, that was Lee Poindexter's filling station, that little station that you see there.
Well, that's something else to see that back, especially how much everything's changed too.
Right.
Since then. We sure do appreciate your comments.
I agree with what has been said so far. My name is Barbara McRae. There was another flood in 1916, I believe, that the water went up to the top of the Indian Mound. And all it would take to do that, again, would be back-to-back hurricanes, and after a winter like we've had. And, you know, you hate to think that could happen, but it could happen. It's not even been 100 years. But the floodplains are there to protect the rest of the land from floods, and I think we have to floodplains. So I hope that will make it possible to go around. Thank you.
Thank you, Barbara.
I'm Chris Brower, and I live on the Colosseja River and have been witness to Ivan and all the destruction there, as well as even just the heavy rains we had this winter. I'm not an expert on constitutional law, but I personally believe that if Senate Bill 612 got any further, it will eventually be appealed and struck down, because it's hard to imagine that the Constitution allows that laws be imposed that prohibit counties and towns from putting in their own regulations, even if they are stricter. I just want to go on record as being opposed to changing the requirements and allowing fill in floodplains, again, because of what I witnessed on the Colosseja, as has already been brought up. Certainly, someone may want to make their property higher and prettier and all that, but we already know with water dynamics, that's just channeling the water further down and causing destruction on other people's property. People that bought and built where it is legal and acceptable, and now may find themselves being in a flood zone that didn't exist prior to that. As well as, you know, when floods do happen, we obviously would appreciate that a lot of that fill ends up not only in the rivers, killing all the fish and all that, but it will end up downstream somewhere, further causing additional problems. So just want to go on record as hoping that we'll stick with what we've got, not allow fill.
Thanks, Chris.
My name's Bill McClarney, and for the last 30-odd years, I've lived in Macon County on a piece of property which includes a substantial amount of floodplain. And if that isn't sufficient to justify my being here today, I'm also a professional aquatic biologist. I've devoted a major part of my career to the Tennessee River watershed issues. So I think the opinion you're going to get from me is going to qualify as informed opinion where floodplain issues are concerned. Bottom line first, I'm totally opposed to altering the fill provisions in the existing floodplain ordinance. And I could go on for a long time about why that's my opinion. I'll just mention a couple of things. We hear a lot of talk pro and con in this context about property rights, and I think that's very appropriate. I'm not as happy with the vocabulary of property rights advocates, which some of us use, because I think that creates a false impression that there's somebody out there who's against private property rights. There may be, but I very seriously doubt they're represented in this room or in responsible circles in Macon County. I think all of us at one time and another enjoy the exercise of our private property rights and want to continue to do so. However, something that sometimes gets lost in the heat of debate is that in a democracy, to me, it's fundamental that if my exercise of my right impinges on your ability to exercise your right, then we got to sit down and talk about it. And I would like to think that that's what we're doing today, is talking about some of those things. In fact, I may startle you a little bit if I offer the opinion that we're not here today talking about floodplain management. None of us. And why do I say that? You can have floodplain management, and they've been had by this planning board and other venues. We can talk about the value of agriculture in the floodplain. We can talk about livestock and roads and recreational use and building in the floodplain, and we all don't have to agree on every point, and it's a good discussion. Fill is fundamentally different. If you fill a portion of the floodplain, then that portion of the floodplain ceases to be floodplain. And whatever benefit that you get from doing that fill detracts from the free benefits that the rest of us get from having a functional floodplain. So I guess I would just like to conclude by saying that I think that there's an element of responsibility there that behooves especially county government and state government. And I can't say anything that's going to affect what happens with Bill 612. I hope Chris is right if it does pass. But even if it is put into effect, I would like to walk away from this whole issue that is finally settled, feeling proud of Macon County and the people that we select to be our leaders. So my take-home message to the planning board, through the planning board, to the commissioners, and anybody else who might ultimately get to vote or otherwise influence a decision on floodplain issues is that let's get beyond just thinking about materialist issues, if you will. Let's get beyond making decisions based on the fact that this guy here has a big investment and this guy down here is poor, so they're going to favor the guy that's got the big investment. And let's make decisions based on a feeling of what's right, and let's do what's right for the land and our neighbors.
Thank you, Bill.
I'm Doug Woodward and live out in County, and actually out in Oak Grove, County. And speak as an engineer and a longtime river person today. I have lived in Macon County 31 years. Before that, I was in Atlanta for about, near for about 10 years. And there was a problem there in the early 70s where Riverbend Apartments decided to build right below one of the bridges, and it was a massive fill operation. And they did. And what happened was that down at Paces Ferry Road, there were two, I would call them mansions, and I have slides somewhere in my archives of those in flood. But they were very surprised with the amount of water that got suddenly downstream to the Paces Ferry area in Atlanta. And my point is simply you don't just start making exceptions to a very good rule. I mean, I could say the same thing, perhaps. I mean, I do live on the creek, but I could say, well, my septic tank's full, I want an exception so I can straight pipe a while. And I don't think that would be granted, and it shouldn't be. And I feel the very same way about the, meddling with the floodplain and changing it where you're damming up and, not letting it do its thing. Thanks.
Thank you, Doug.
Well, I'll jump up. My name is Andy Van Tecklenburg, and I guess you can tell from my voice, I am not a native, original native of Macon County. I've been here since 2005, and frankly, I could pretty much live anywhere in the country I want. My wife and I chose to come here to Macon County, and we looked all over Western, North Carolina, South Carolina, Tennessee. We could pretty much go anywhere. And we chose Macon County. We love this place. And even though I've only been here since 2005, we just every day is like a joy. a realtor whose family has been here for many, many, many generations sold a house to me, and he said to us, I'm going to show you a house, but I have to warn you, last year we had a flood. And if you buy this house, the only way to get to downtown Franklin is to go over the mountain to Bryson City, over to Dillsboro, and then back to downtown Franklin. And I did buy that house, and every day I see exactly where 28 flooded out. I understand people wanting to make a profit. I am all for Macon County. I'm all for development. I'm all for growth. But there's a reason you have terms like floodplain and bottomland. There's a reason those terms have existed for so long. And I don't think we have to be geniuses to figure out, you don't have to be a realtor to figure out there's a reason why property A is this price and property B is that price. And to take advantage of that at the cost of other people, I don't think it's fair. It is not going to help our county to grow and develop. I keep thinking of wildflower up the hill, and I don't want to have a wild river. I'll just say one other thing. Last night going home on 28 North, there was a car stuck or standing in the middle of 28, right near Lost Bridge. And of course we pulled over and said, are you all right? You need help? And a young family was in the car, and the man said, no, I'm just admiring your beautiful river. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, I'll speak next just to say that Land Trust of Wilmington, Tennessee has not changed its position since the last two times you heard it. That's right. We are still against changing the ordinance to allow field in the floodplain.
I'm John Ledden. I'm also new to the neighborhood. As Bill, although I'm neither as experienced or eloquent as Bill, my background is in aquatic ecology and wetlands and those kinds of things. As a result of this conversation that's going on, I pulled out the floodplain ordinance that the county has, and given the topography of this area, I was frankly a little bit surprised at the amount of development that is allowed in the floodplains here. Given that, the controls and restrictions on that development seem to be very sound and appropriate. So, on balance, I saw this as a well-written ordinance. Given that, you all know the functions of floodplains, and everyone here has spoken a piece about why they're so valuable. You can think of this change as a risk management issue, and that's basically what most ordinances and regulations are about, is risk management. This type of change that is being considered for this floodplain ordinance imposes no risk on the developer or landowner, but it does impose a significant risk, as has been discussed, on everyone downstream. Protection of the capacity of those floodplains to absorb that additional flow is really critical, particularly in an area like this where you have steep slopes, you'll have increasing development, and you've got very fast runoff, which swells those rivers very, very quickly. So any additional filling, reduction of the absorption capacity of those floodplains is really a bad idea. And I guess I'm opposed to any modifications that would allow fill there. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm Barry Clinton. I'm current chair of the Watershed Council and co-author of this ordinance we're discussing. And I just want to reiterate something, and I've spoken a couple of times before, that is important to recognize, and that is that the ordinance is not designed to prohibit development in the floodplain. There are ways of doing it right that require additional engineering that you may not have needed not in the floodplain, where the floods would actually impact your development. But I just want to make sure you understand that it does not eliminate development in the floodplain. And there are many examples in the county where development has taken place in the floodplain safely, and I think you need to look at those as fine examples, although they might be a bit more costly than development outside the floodplain, but it is possible, and I just want you to keep that in mind.
My name is Ken Murphy, and I'm here because I favor economic development, but I'm against this change to the ordinance. I think economic development is great if done in the right way. I sit on the Economic Development Commission because I'm in favor of improving the economy of Macon County, but I think in the long term, our interests are best served by keeping the ordinance in the fashion that it's been prepared. You know, it's hard, given all the comments against this change, to know what the arguments for it are. The only argument I've heard to date is private property rights. But you know, private property rights are not a trump card. You know, our nation was built on the concept that we live in a civilized society, and that there are certain things that we take into account. We take into account other people's interests. I mean, James Madison is often held out as the protector of private property rights. But James Madison was in favor of appropriate regulation. He was against arbitrary restrictions. And for all the reasons that have been discussed, the restrictions that are currently in place are not arbitrary. There are good sound reasons, which I'm not going to repeat, for these to exist. And I just want to close by saying that Madison wrote that a government following Republican principles derives energy from the will of society and thus acts in the larger public interest, not in the interest of a particular faction. And I think it's important that this commission, when making its decision, take the interests of the larger society into account and not individuals who may have a vested interest. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Murphy, you mentioned you're with the EDC. Are you here on behalf of the EDC?
I am not.
Okay.
Do we have anyone else that wants to comment? If not, then we will close the public comment session. And I'd like to say on behalf of the planning board that we do appreciate all the comments and all the information that has been given to us by members of the community, members of the Watershed Council, aquatic biologists. I got a personal email from Mr. Metter, and I'm sure a lot of the planning board members did as well. And you know, it says a lot about the community we live in, and it is something we should be thankful for when everyone wants to take interest and play a role in something like this. And you know, but like I said earlier, the uncertainty that is surrounding this decision in light of Senate Bill 612 right now, which in its current form would invalidate our ordinance that's on the books right now, or perhaps a portion thereof. We don't want to, as a planning board, we don't want to go ahead and make a decision that would be saddling up the horses just to go back and circle the wagons, if you would, because as a local government in North Carolina, we are a creature of the state. So I know that probably after all this comment and all the information you've provided to us, which we are so grateful for, and we really appreciate that, we're not going to take a vote on this tonight. We'll wait and see what happens in the state legislature with Senate Bill 612. So with that being said, again, we appreciate you coming out. And are there any other announcements that anybody has or would like to make? Matt, you got any other announcements for us, Commissioner?
Going to the courthouse. Let's go crunch numbers with us tonight.
Going to the courthouse. There you go.
Bobby will join.
Matt, can I ask a question to the planning board? In the light of your comments, in the event Senate Bill 612 does pass, is that going to be your motivation to change the existing ordinance?
The way I read it, we'll have no choice. We'll have to go back through all of our ordinances that the state has adopted a model ordinance for, and we'll have to either retrofit them or redo the entire ordinances. We're not sure at this time.
I guess
And that's something that we'll just have to wait and see how it rolls out there.
I guess that's what my question was, this one discussion on the fill, was that predicated because of this potential Senate Bill 612? Or as you said, it was for other reasons, and there's probably lots of our regulations that would be gutted if Senate 612
Right.
should go through.
And this conversation on the floodplain ordinance was a priority task to us at our annual retreat with the commissioners. And that was one of the ordinances that they requested us look at, and so we obliged them in doing so.
So Derek, may I follow up on that? Why are we kicking the can down the road? Why can't we go ahead and call the vote, and whatever 612 ends up being, then we'll deal with it then? But why not go ahead and vote on the ordinance to exist as it's currently, in its current form, instead of waiting for 612? I don't know, what do you gain by doing that, I guess?
Barry, I can't answer that question, and I can't speak on behalf of the planning board. I can't speak on behalf of the board of commissioners. Commissioner Tate would like to address that, but all I can say, from my personally, and I know you're not supposed to give personal opinions, but I don't think that, knowing is that we are a creature of the state, I just don't see how that would be efficient government, to go ahead and get this on the process and get this in our local agenda process when we're not sure what's going to come down from the state, and would we have to go back through and redo everything we did, and that's going to take a lot of time and effort on the part of the government that needs to be addressing issues that we're certain that there are more certainty than what's surrounding this.
I guess all of the groundwork's been done, though, is what I'm saying. So there wouldn't be any additional work that would have to be done.
Well, my answer to that would be, there would be a lot of additional work if tonight it changed and fill was allowed.
Fill isn't. Fill was allowed, but you change it to allow fill.
To allow fill, then when all of a sudden, and then all of a sudden you take the state, well, I think the state allows fill though, don't they? So I guess you would change it, if it changed, so now, I don't know, I guess not changing it would be longer term. I don't know, I guess there is no.
Well,
let them decide until you change them.
Well, I've got two questions along those lines. One is what will you do with respect to enforcement of current, what's currently on the books? Because even if 612 passes in the way you've read it, the first requirement is that there be an intent for state preemption. And it's not clear from the face of it that every state regulation in this arena would be intended to preempt. So there's a lot that's got to happen between, even if that bill passes, there's a lot that's got to happen between passage and litigation, as Chris mentioned, about what does it mean, what does it apply to, and so forth. How does the county intend to?
I think this would be covered under the section that I read, 6, as there already is a model ordinance out there that for the floodplains that is a state model ordinance. It says here, the ordinance regulates a field that is also regulated by a state or federal statute enforced by or a regulation promulgated by an environmental agency, which there's already a flood ordinance being enforced by an environmental agency. And this classification I read was one of the 7 that are listed that would make the local ordinance inconsistent if it did that.
Regardless of the first prong of the test you read.
But this is not a test, it's just listing 6 specific ways that the local ordinance would become invalid. And this is one of the ways it would become invalid. It doesn't have to meet 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6.
No, I understand.
It just has to be 1, 2, 3.
I'll discuss it with you after the meeting because I want to go over the first part of that.
But the question is then, and maybe we don't know, maybe Mr. Tate knows, but if 612 passes, does that mean that all localities in North Carolina suddenly switch to state model ordinances? Or is there going to be a very lengthy process where every county, every municipality is reviewing their ordinances for which aspects are in compliance and which aren't? So there are chances that it will be a very long time it's all settled, in which case our ordinance would still hold, right?
Yes.
Yes.
I did have a question. How does the North Carolina current ordinance differ from Macon County ordinance?
It allows fill in the
Fill in the floodplain, and then we require an additional height of elevation for building height.
Okay, so there's very little restriction on the North Carolina ordinance?
No, there's none.
None at all?
But it would still, we would still hold that current till our legal counsel advises otherwise.
Unless the county commissioners decide to change it themselves.
As it currently sits, the second part of number 6 there, if this ordinance that the state has a model ordinance for, if that local ordinance is more stringent than that state ordinance that's being enforced by the state agency, then that is when it becomes invalid, according to this.
It used to read that if you were a county and you made a state law, it had to be at least as stringent as the state and can go beyond. So the only thing they're changing is can go beyond.
The more stringent would apply.
So if I understand the line of logic here, if this bill passes in the Senate, then by default, we get floodplain fill.
No, it's already passed the Senate, it's went to the House, it's got to pass
Okay,
the
so
House.
if it
then it has
passes
to
in
go
the
to
House,
governor and sign it.
then by default, we get fill in floodplain.
But not instantly, not until all the appraisal is done.
Unless there's litigation or anything like that. But there's a home rule state, okay? That means that you're like the town. They can do whatever they pretty much want because they're a, what do you call it, incorporated city. But as a county, you're not that way. You're just an arm of the government, of the state government. And whatever state government says goes. You can litigate that all day long. That's where it works in North Carolina.
But there's a lot of opposition from large areas like Mecklenburg County. There will be, if it passes, there will be major challenges from a lot of the urban areas. I think we're looking at a long process.
May I just shoot something in here that may be irrelevant, because I realize I'm speaking as an individual, and the planning board is an organization, and so on, but I would like to go back to my final comment, and I would like to see the county express the courage of their convictions, if they have them, and do what is right, and say what I think is logical, that we do need restrictions on floodplain fill in this area because of its particular topography. Win or lose. If we lose in Raleigh, we lose in Raleigh, but at least we will have a statement of what's right in Macon County, in my opinion.
Yeah, everybody knows basically, if you're a hydrologist, you know that it's different in flatter areas than it is here in the mountains. It's a totally different animal. So how they can treat us the same as they would somebody on the Neuse River over New Bern is beyond me, because it's not the same at all. They need to look at it in a totally different fashion. You got higher velocity, all the steep slope, water coming off out of the mountains, versus a slow-flowing river in a flat area.
You feel our pain with every topic. It's not only us, it's magistrates, it's schools, it's roads, it's everything. The western part of the state, excuse me, it's probably in paper, but kind of gets the shaft sometimes.
Then why have a county government? The state says this is my minimum and this is the maximum and it's the same.
Well, there's a lot of reasons.
What can you guys do then?
Well,
what can you rule on?
Your public safety, there's a lot of reasons for county government to do that.
And they also don't have, the state also doesn't have an ordinance that, like all of our ordinances. I mean, all of our ordinances, for instance, a sign ordinance, the county ordinance, the state doesn't have it, so we still have to have, there's a lot of ordinances.
It seems like you're almost going to be redundant on anything that has any any credibility or anything of value on it.
Again, we appreciate you coming out, we appreciate your comments, and like I say, you know, it's good to live in a place where we got citizens that are so concerned with what's going on, that they'll come and provide input and give us information at these meetings.
I guess I have one request, Derek. If, people have been very conscientious coming out for the last 3 months, new people, repeat people, people who have put a lot of effort. And if we let this go, then, their comments are gonna sink into the past. I would like to see a compilation of the comments that the public has made over the last 3 months, and to at least have those presented to us in summary form, and to review as a group the comments we have heard, which have been not just opinions, but a lot of good information. And I hate to see something like this just lose the momentum of all the effort the public has put into talking with us.
I don't think it will. I think y'all, my guesstimation is on it is that y'all will probably have a vote on it at y'all's next meeting, which will be the June meeting. There was a lot of people absent tonight. We had another item on here, and we know that this, according to the North Carolina Association of County Commissioners, has a whole lot of steam going behind it. And from my understanding, we'll know something pretty certain here over the next
Does
few
the
days.
Association of County Commissioners, are they taking a position on Bill 612?
I'm not sure if they have or not.
With that, our next meeting, next regularly scheduled meeting, it will be here at 4 o'clock on June the 20th. That's the third Thursday in June. And Commissioner, you got anything else you'd like? With nothing else to be said, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor? Signify by leaving.
All right, Bill. I'm right here.